Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your board game doctor today. And I think this is the first time that I've done a video that's completely in person, so welcome to that. And the reason is because I am reviewing Worldbreakers, Advent of the Khanate. This is a game by Ellie Amir, and who graciously gifted this copy for review. And the main reason I also want to talk about this is because it came with the Indigo Sisterhood expansion, the first major expansion to this game. So what I want to do is show you some of the components, talk about the cards in this game, give you a quick overview of what this game is about, and then do the thing that I usually do, which is talk about game comparisons, peer review as well. Will leave out my formal review of this game, since this is a donated and sponsored review, but hopefully that information will let you know what this game is all about, and as well as what people might say about this game. So on the table, I have a few cards laid out in a setting that you would normally find it in. And so this game is a game for 1 to 2 players, and it takes place in a kind of alternate dimension of like ancient, I guess not Mesopotamian, but kind of the ancient times surrounding like the Mongols and the Silk Road. We've got Marco Polo, that kind of era, a couple thousand years ago. And what you're trying to do in this game is gain power. And in a 2-player game, the first player to get to 10 power wins. You gain power through many ways. Some of them include battling with your followers, gaining power through locations, and other card effects. And whoever gets there first wins. You have a couple of different kinds of cards that you have in your game. You have the followers, which have attack and defense points, to use general terms. You have locations, which are utilized in a way where during certain card effects you have the ability to remove these tokens from them to utilize their effect. So like gaining power, which is the points that you need to win the game, gaining Mythium as well, which is the main resource that this game uses. Every card, including the locations, have costs for them to be played out onto your field, and so on and so forth, right? Everyone has a Worldbreaker. This is your main leader. They each have a certain ability that they can use during the game. You have standing, which every certain Worldbreaker and deck that is pre-constructed for this game follows one of these 4 standing, or I guess guilds. And so as you play the game, you, with the track of a dice, you can keep track of how much standing you have to be able to place certain cards in the game. For example, the Nocturnal Reaper requires 2 moon standing to be played out, in addition to 5 Mythium. The crux of this game, though, is that it's a kind of a back and forth, and this is more of the board gamey type experience, I suppose, that this game provides, where rounds are kept track of through this track. Everyone will be able to play 4 turns in a round, and you go back and forth doing so. You end it with a rally phase, which tells you to utilize cards that have rally effects, gaining Mythium, drawing a card, and then checking for victory, whoever has 10 power first. You flip this over, and whoever went last in the last round starts first, and you keep going. I don't have the... actually, do I? I might right here. So for actions, you can do a couple of things on your turn. You can just gain a Mythium, you could draw a card. You can pay 2 cards to gain 1 standing with any guild. So that is with this. You can play a card from your hand by paying its Mythium and making sure that you have enough standing. You can attack, or you can develop a location that you control. So there are rules for combat. I won't get into that, but essentially you attack, you declare attackers, the opponent will defend, or put out followers to defend if chosen. And if you defeat opponents, the followers are discarded. And but if you, I guess, hit for face, to use a Hearthstone term, that's one way to gain power as well. So that's all I will say about the rules of this game. And now let's get into some game comparisons. Now, for game comparisons, there are some that I'll get into a little bit later in the review. Some of these games I haven't played, like Android Netrunner. And of course, a big comparison to any card battler game is Magic the Gathering. However, two games that stand out to me the most include, first, Lorcana. So Disney Lorcana, which came out almost 2 years ago now, or was it last year? I don't know. This game feels similar to that, not only because you can play, because it's a card battler where you play, 1v1, but the element of combat is not necessarily to hit someone else and deplete their HP. The combat is a way to gain power, which is, a resource or a point goal that you're trying to achieve before the other opponent. Very similar to questing in Lorcana. The sole focus of attacking is not to gain that. You can via certain cards, and that's true in both games, especially when you attack, and I think the key word is breach. In Worldbreakers, right? That gets you power for attacking, but you can get power in other ways. And the cards in Lorcana, in addition to having attack and defense, they also provide lore that you can quest for, essentially. So both games offer a similar goal as far as what you're trying to achieve, which is more point-based and non-interactive as far as like HP goes, which is found in many card battlers in the market today. And the second game that I want to compare it to is Lord of the Rings, the living card game. This is the living card game that I have the most experience with. I have played Arkham Horror, Marvel Champions, etc., but I really enjoy Lord of the Rings, one, because of the theme. I think both of these games have themes that I find interesting, and both games offer a story to follow as well, more so solo in the Worldbreakers system with the solo campaign. The Lord of the Rings is a cooperative game that has many different packs that you can open and play through, and the model for getting you cards is different as well. But if you're to play and compare the base game for both games, you have a lot of options to deck build right out of the box. You have different heroes that you can play with in Lord of the Rings that you can mix and match with, and then the cards that you use in these decks as well. Very similar to how it is approached in Worldbreakers. I think as a whole, of course, Worldbreakers is newer and has more of a limited card set than Lord of the Rings does now, even with the new second edition that has been released in the past few years. And so, yes, you do have more options to deck build with in Lord of the Rings and some of the other living card games, but that same feeling is similar. You're not going out and buying trading packs or booster packs to try to find those rare cards as you see in some other new card games like Lorcana, like Altered, etc. And so there are other card games now like Altered in the market where it's more, let's open up some packs and try to find cards that way. Worldbreakers is a one and done type of deal, and if you like that, if you don't particularly enjoy the chase of finding those rare cards and getting multiple copies of those rare cards as you find in Lorcana, that's something that turned me off of Lorcana, is the expense of money and time to try to find those expensive cards to build the best decks. Here you can mess around with the system in Worldbreakers by you spending a one-time fee and hopefully finding some interesting combinations with what you have. So that's it for game comparisons. Now let's move on to the next section. Now, before I get further, I do want to focus more of my time on the expansion. So the expansion comes with 2 new decks featuring these 2 cards. Miriam, the Worldbreaker, the Seeking the Grotto. She, after you exhaust a follower during your turn, you can exhaust her to ready that follower. So that's a pretty neat effect. It kind of reminds me of Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings trading or living card game and his effect, and I think that's pretty powerful. You also have Kublai Khan. So his is after combat you initiated ends. If the attack was successful, exhaust him to develop a location you control. So this is really nice, and I'm sure his deck really focuses on building up a lot of followers, having them be able to attack, and then not only do you have the chance to get power from his followers, but also to develop locations for resources and additional power. So pretty strong as well. Now, the other thing that this game comes with, in addition to those new decks, is part 2 of the solo campaign. So I need to mention that the original game, the base game, comes with a solo campaign, a couple of chapters that introduce some new cards, bend the rules a little bit, and tells a story. The story continues with this, and I've played. I kind of skipped around and I played a game of the first chapter in this, which I think is chapter 8 or something like that in the grand scheme of things. And it was introducing some new locations, and of course you get to play with the new cards. It's really good, and so that is an awesome experience, especially if you enjoy the solo campaign from the first game. The story continues, and I think this is a great option. In addition to playing this competitively with other people, you can be competitive with the AI as well, and the rules for the AI continue to change as well. In the first game, if you're not familiar with it, you have a deck of cards, which I believe is in the bag or in the box right now. But you're essentially playing cards that will tell you to recruit a deck of followers that you have pre-constructed, and you attack with them essentially. And so it's basically an opportunity to have followers attacking you for power. But I believe in the original campaign as well as in this one, it introduces locations that have certain effects where cards will develop those locations for the AI opponent to gain power as well. And it's an ingenious way as well with an action priority. I actually have an example right here where you simply follow this cascade of options. If you can do the first one, you do it. If you can't, you move on to the next one, and so on and so forth. And so you essentially are able to gain Mythium and play against an opponent as if they were using Mythium as a resource, and allow them to attack, develop locations, etc. And so I really enjoyed that aspect. I think the original aspect of the game, at least in the very first campaign, it's nice to have a easier time easing yourself into the game with a solo mode that isn't hard to manage. But upgrading this to make it feel more like you're playing another opponent, I don't think is too much of an ask, especially as you become more familiar with the game. So yeah, and you can see that there is a lot to go through. I think some of this is extra cards from a deck, but regardless, I think there's a lot. So there's a lot of campaign for you to get through, and a lot of story to explore, and the story itself is pretty neat too. I know I'm not going to go into too many of my thoughts about the game, but I really did enjoy the flavor of the individual cards as well as the story mode as well. It's pretty engaging and creates a really nice backdrop to play this game with. So that is a little teaser of what the Indigo Sisterhood has to offer. So after summarizing the comments that people have made about this game over the last year and a half or so, and putting that through AI, I've come up with a pros and cons list for Worldbreakers as a whole. Starting with the pros, this game, to some people, has a strong game design, right? Getting back to some of the game comparisons here, of course you have to compare these card battler games, 1v1 to Magic, but also to Netrunner, which is a game that I haven't played, but feels, I think, very similar in the fact that you can play two different factions or two different Worldbreakers that are asymmetric in the way that they gain power. And so this is a similarity that a lot of people who enjoy Netrunner have said about this game. The mechanisms are interesting as well. In particular, to me, I'll just interject what I like the most about this game is that each turn you have a list of actions to choose from. A very, action selection type of mechanism that is very much a board gaming Euro style mechanism, right? And so knowing when to play cards, when to develop locations, when to just draw cards as well. You don't get to do all of those on a turn. You have a quick snappy turn that is decided on one thing or the other. And so the order in which you choose that feels very strongly influenced by Euro style mechanisms, and so I think that was pretty interesting here. You got pre-constructed decks, but you can also draft in a similar fashion to trading card games like Magic. You out of the box can have enough cards to draft from and create decks not only of a single standing type, but you can mix the guilds even so during the game to create some interesting decks and experiences. We've talked about the solo mode and campaign. We, all of the different factions and followers, the way that you can mix and match them is very interesting. People thought that this game was pretty balanced. The quality is great. The art looks amazing. The theme as well is cool as well. It's a theme that is not heavily explored in the board gaming or even card gaming world, from what I understand. And yes, it's all out of the box, very much similar to a living card game. You've got all that you need to build your decks and to play constructed as well, and to play the campaign, all coming in one single box. So there you go. The things that people didn't like as much about the game, I suppose the lack of thematic immersion, where perhaps the history setting is not as developed or dove into. I think maybe this game is more mechanical, and the setting itself tends to build on certain individual cards, but maybe as a whole people were hoping for more of a thematic immersion or integration with maybe how those cards work, or maybe the way that the campaign plays out as well. Who knows? Some people, comparing this to other games, I don't know if Netrunner does this, but with Magic, you can, include a couple of copies of certain cards. I know in living card games, you can do this as well. You can have like 2 or 3 of a certain card in the deck, but in this game, it's kind of like Marvel Snap, where you can only have one type of card of, its printing in the deck itself. And so that increases the randomness of hoping to draw into certain cards for combos, etc. So some people didn't enjoy that. The drafting feels loose to some. It doesn't lack it lacks the tension that is found in other styles of drafting. So even though a drafting mode is there, maybe some people would prefer a different way to draft it. So the solo mode, since it is a campaign, it kind of feels like a one and done type of experience. You don't. One thing with the campaign itself is that you will play as a predetermined character, like Miriam in the Indigo Sisterhood expansion, or as Marco Polo as you start out the game with Marco Polo in the first game. So you can't really mix and match the different opponents or use different Worldbreakers yourself during that event. So in order to do that, to use different Worldbreakers, you would have to play someone else. And so for those who are strictly solo limited, that might not be the most enjoyable part about this game. So this game, despite it having the variability with the mixing and matching of different cards, maybe those combos aren't as exciting as you might find in games like Magic or even Netrunner. Sometimes it is frustrating to be depleted of a lot of resources, such as Mythium, and so when you spend a turn just gaining a Mythium, or even a couple of turns before the round ends and the rally phase gives you a little bit more Mythium, or cards, if you play at all of your cards and you're lacking anything to do with Mythium, if you have a lot of it, then your turns can kind of feel like you're grinding to a halt. And perhaps if your opponent has been managing their resources more effectively, then they'll be able to snowball and be able to gain more power than you can. And so maybe there's an element of mastering the pacing of this game, and after the couple of plays that I've played, I can see that this is true. It's sometimes better not to play out all of your cards and to wait and see what your opponent might do. And so, I think this might frustrate newer players, but maybe as you invest more time in the game, this can become a more manageable aspect. The combat is pretty simple, very simple, very similar to, say, Lorcana, where the way that you attack and defend and gain damage, etc., is pretty pretty simple, and doesn't match up to some of the other card systems out there. The rulebook might be a little long and clunky as well to some. Some found it pretty clear, but this is in the base game a 32-page rulebook or so. There's 30 plus pages. It's all a very linear book, and so there's a lot of examples and pictures and things like that, but maybe the ordering or something like that didn't appeal to some people. But anyway, that's what some people thought about Worldbreakers, and I'm going to end it there. I'm not going to go into any more of my thoughts or rate this game once again, because this game was given to me as a gift by Ellie, and so once again, thank you, Ellie, for this opportunity to talk about this game. To sum it up, this game is a card battler in the similar vein of like Magic or Netrunner or Lord of the Rings, living card game, or Lorcana. But it adds a 13th century Asian theme to it. You've got a out-of-the-box experience to play head-to-head with pre-con decks, to draft them as well. And you have a solo campaign that you can follow throughout and experience the story that is written for this game. I think this game has the ability and probably the future of further expansions, as is evident with the Indigo Sisterhood, which introduces 2 more decks and cards that are associated with those decks, and Worldbreakers, and a continuation of the story. And so it'll be really interesting to see how this game evolves in the future. And overall, too, it kind of features some Euro-style mechanisms in how you select your actions, which makes this game a little bit more unique compared to the other card games that are on the market. So take that as you will. If you're interested, seek this game out, and we'll see what the future holds for Worldbreakers. Thanks again for consulting with me. Hope you have a great day and that you schedule an appointment with me real soon. And I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.